Good afternoon and welcome to the July 28th, 2009 meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority. May we have the roll call, please?
Authority members: Freeman.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Brazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Najarian.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the July 28, 2009 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, July 23, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. The next item?
Next item is approval of minutes. Is there a motion?
Second.
If there are no objections or corrections, the minutes will be approved as submitted. Next item?
Next item is oral communications. No cards were submitted.
Have they been transferred to me? No cards were submitted?
No.
I'll close oral communications. Next item, please.
Next item on the business agenda at 6A is Acting Director of Community Development and Housing regarding Quality of Life Indicators Project Update. At 6A1 is a motion to receive and file report.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird?
Yes, I'll go to Sam Engel for the staff report. Sam?
Thank you, Mr. Starbird, members of the Housing Authority, Chair Najarian. The Neighborhood Services staff has been responsible for compiling the information that was submitted by the Community Committee that was involved in updating the quality of life indicators. You had asked for an update as to where we are with preparing the document, and that is what we've submitted to you today. Just as a matter of real brief background for you, the indicators were originally published in 2002. They were a project of the Glendale Healthier Community Coalition. The coalition and the City of Glendale received a grant from the State of California Department of Health for the purposes of community planning and to develop the original document. That document, as I said, was published in 2002 and was intended to be updated periodically. The coalition elected to update the project. The updating of the project began last year. There was a community-wide committee of people that were interested in this who did the review and assessment of the original indicators, compiled the data, and that was submitted in early March. Staff has been involved in taking that information and compiling it in a format where it can be used again for the next several years as measuring the quality of life indicators. The report that was presented to you gave you the study plan that the committee was involved in, including a series of questions that the committee kind of used as a means of compiling the information in order to get that. We provided you with two handouts. One of them is the let me back up a little bit. When we did the original indicators report, it was published with a hard copy. The indicators report that will be published this time will be published electronically and will be available for those people that still need a hard copy on an as-needed basis. But the document itself will become a very dynamic document in that we can update it as information changes, and it is much more readily accessible. The two attachments that I just talked about a minute ago are the two things. One of them is the actual web page that is the introduction. You actually have a color copy of it. I'm holding up the black and white copy. The second one is one of the actual indicator categories that has been complete, that kind of shows you how each one of the ultimate indicators will be working whenever you get that. And I show them to you because we're quite proud of the way this is ultimately going to be, because it becomes universally accessible to anybody that would like to get this information. As a matter of background, there are now 12 indicator categories. Each one of the indicator categories has 5 or 6 actually individual indicator measurements underneath it, and the second exhibit shows a sample of that. As of right now, as of just now before we came into this meeting, all of the research has been completed for all 12 categories. The actual website design is up and running. We are running it on a test site and actually developing it. We are through with doing 5 of the complete indicator categories, which means that each one of the categories will have a measurement, such as the example that we've shown you. Each one of those measurements will provide the information, what was measured, what the finding was for the measurement, and then provides the internet user with the actual raw data that they can access by clicking on one of the tabs that's on there. Then presents that data in a chart format, whatever chart might work, whether it's pie chart, graph, bar chart, those kind of things, which makes it a little more visual in terms of being able to understand which the indicator might be. We anticipate presenting to you the final indicator report and having the ceremonial switching on of the actual website sometime in late August. We said early August in here. This has been in preparation, this report, for about 2 weeks. We think it'll be mid to late August to get that to you. And we're prepared to answer any questions if you would like to ask them.
Mr. Milano, have you seen this? Okay, just want to make sure you...
Any comments? Okay, I have a question, Sam. In these 11 categories, are there objective standards that are stated, and then the observations and the data that you've collected then measured against those objective standards, or is it more just qualitative? For instance, let me just give you one of the things I was thinking of. I'm looking at housing resources. In certain cities, their standard would be, we don't care if there's any available housing. We don't care if there's any affordable housing. We like it just the way it is. Certain cities adjacent to Glendale, certain other closed communities. Other cities may have a very liberal goal of saying that we want to make sure that anyone who wants to purchase a home in our city is able to do so, and that there be an available properties for that. So when we talk about housing resources, I presume we're going to get some data on home sales and pricing and the transiency of the homeowners. Are we going to measure that against a standard, a bar that has been set?
Chair Najarian, members of the Housing Authority, there are some, and let me go into one that's relatively an easy one to answer the question. There are national or accepted standards for a number of these indicators, and a good example would be acres of parkland per capita population. That's a national standard used by the National Park and Recreation Association. We can compare what the national standard is to what Glendale has, and we would state that for that one. For some, like housing, in answer to your question, there may not be a particular standard. There may be a goal that we would pull out of our housing element that says, and those tend to be less specific in terms of figures saying that we would do this, but we're going to provide you with affordability. And you asked the question, we have a goal for, a community could have a goal for affordability, meaning that you would want housing in in ranges of affordability across the spectrum. What we're going to show you in the indicators is what was available from all of these sources in terms of the types of units and what their cost is, but that doesn't mean anything unless you know what the incomes are to be able to afford that. So those two things go into measuring what constitutes affordability of housing. And it's just a flat statement because there is no standard per se that we would compare that with in terms of housing. Let's go to the other part of housing affordability, and that would be with rents. And there will be there's an affordability index for rents as well that compares what a typical two-bedroom, one-bedroom would be, and that comes from I'm sorry, I don't remember the source of that data right now, but it also compares that with what the income is, and that gives you the index of affordability.
Okay, thank you. So, Starbird, did you?
Well, Sam touched on the ones I was going to reference for the most part. You also have RENA numbers in the area of housing that are looking at the future supply that you need to meet. So I know in the housing area they do have data on what people are currently paying versus some of the national indices on how much people should be spending of their disposable income on housing, which will arrive at whether or not you've got housing of a range that is something people can afford. I know we've seen those numbers in the past. So there's a great deal of data out there on housing. My guess is what they compare with and what you receive back will depend in large part on how much data there is out there, what kind of indices already exist in any of these categories.
Mr. Starbird, members of the Housing Authority, that's correct. The purpose of the indicator category, and actually one of the strengths of it, is that it is only capturing the data that's available. Conversely, that's one of the weaknesses of it. And the final report will tell you, in some areas, we think there's an absence of data for some of the things that the committee would like to know. And the final report's going to tell you where that might be.
About 2.5 years ago, we did that. What was that? The survey where we went to
Well, the community planning
the
effort?
community
Yeah.
planning effort. Is any of that data
Yes.
going to be folded
Yes.
into this?
Yes,
And this will be out in August, you say?
late August.
Any other questions? Hold on.
And because the quality of life indicator affects more than just housing, it affects a lot of other areas in the city, it's just a general comment that it's great to have this data, and I appreciate you bringing it to us, but then the authority and council with the next step needs to think about what the next step is. And do we use this data then to come up with goals and priorities that we revisit maybe year to year, so that we can translate this data into an actual action plan that we use for those priorities. And I know that other cities have yearly council retreats, for instance, which are open to the public, where they come up with goals, and not that you're going to hit every one of those, but I think we need to think about what the end game is with these indicators and whether we use them to set priorities.
All right. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Is this a receive and file?
Note and file.
I'll move 6A1.
Roll call, please.
Authority members, Draymond.
Yes.
Are there?
He asked, there were no speaker.
I don't have any speaker cards.
Not on this housing item.
I don't have any speaker.
Did you submit a card?
Not on housing authority. Joint card and redevelopment
Excuse me,
cards.
I
or something.
have a speaker card that was given to me from Mr. Milano on agenda item 1.
That would be it. Oh, no.
And-
This is item 6.
Well, this is
But
item
Yeah.
1 under housing.
But it says, but it's on a redevelopment agency
Oh,
card.
that's-
I don't know if that's what the...
I don't have any cards.
He brought material and everything.
You should know better, Mr. Milano. I mean, this is not your first time around the block.
Here's another one.
Herbert Milano. Mike Mohill to follow.
Thank you, Chairman Najarian, members of the Housing Authority. My name is Herbert Milano. I want to express my appreciation to the authority for proceeding and encouraging these indicators. The idea of having them published on the web, I think, is a fantastic idea, as it allows for the update of that information as more information comes through and as other indicators and indices are presented. My encouragement for the city to take these indicators forward for policy making, as was indicated by Councilman Friedman, is that there's a history of many lofty objectives and studies that were made in the past. And in my submittal to you for the City Council, on the pink documents, I presented to you there a budget study session from April 23rd, 2002, which is a study with objectives with regard to a proposed youth strategy report. And I want to quote a couple of things from this report. It says, the City of Glendale will cultivate an environment that mobilizes the entire community in a united effort to protect and nurture the well-being of youth and their families by using the strengths and resources and diversity of youth and so on. It also says, in its effort to carry out this mission, the city must make the identification of youth needs one of its primary roles. I'll repeat that. The city must make the identification of youth needs one of its primary roles. And it goes on to the additional pages of identifying what the city should do, how much it should fund, and so forth. I think this is probably, one of the best documents that I have seen the city management generate and provide to a city council. The unfortunate part is that the recommendations with regard to the funding never really came through. So 1.7 million per year. And so when I look at the overall history of funding of programs such as this, that eventually you get a report and it's simply filed and forgotten. In the meantime, the assignment of the city's resources, the taxpayers' money that you collect, wind up significantly in, crime and safety and police and the tail end of the product. And we never really get a chance to address in a proactive way all of these issues that could be addressed at a much lower cost to society. And without having these indicators being reviewed, without going back and reviewing the documents or in the studies that you yourselves promoted, then a lot of the activities that occur here are simply, transactional in nature. They don't really take us as a society to a better place. And it is my hope that you review what the City Council had actually looked over back in 2002 and see what those goals were and see if perhaps these indicators show you, if we actually made headway towards achieving those objectives. Thank you.
Mike Mohill?
Good evening. See, how do I say this? Mr. Mayor, the formality. Mr. Najaran, he's a leader, again. Council members, thank you very much for my time to speak. And I wasn't going to speak on this subject matter, but after I heard Councilwoman Laura Freeman made a comment about setting goals and following up on them, I said, wow, is this a new concept? Maybe the city will follow up on quality of life items. I certainly hope so. Mr. Milano said it so beautifully. He said back a few years ago, you set up these goals and promises to the citizens of Glendale, and then you've just filed it, and you spent all your money not on parks, recreational items, but on basically fire department, police department with salaries and pensions. Unfortunately, maybe we can this time turn the beat around. Because we have a new council now with new goals. I'm looking positive. I hope quality of life becomes more important than ever before. Love to see before. I know funding is very limited, but wouldn't it be nice to have a regional park in South Glendale? We can call it, pardon me, Herbert Milano Park, because to me, he's the leader. Him and Mr. Barry Allen are our leaders. They are the gadflies of the outside. And Mr. Milano has been asking for years now for regional parks south of the 134 freeway. Not another mini park like we have at Wilson. Something at least the size that the kids can play baseball. How about a soccer game? Armenians love soccer. Mr. Najaran, don't they? And Mr. Quintero, the Hispanics love soccer too. So why can't we have a soccer field south of the 134 freeway? The sports complex is beautiful, but that's way up North Glendale. That's north of the 134 freeway. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards. Mr. Draymond?
I'm Norwegian on one side. We love curling.